I have done countless stories on Polaris's RZR vehicles, and I honestly thought I didn't have anything else to say. But this latest RZR release of the Turbo R and most importantly the Pro R have left me with a whole bunch of new thoughts on the only vehicle that can claim the title of the world's first mass-produced sport side-by-side. So today I do want to go back and touch on a few RZR milestones, ones that I feel paved the way for the all-new and groundbreaking Pro R. To start, let's go right back to the beginning, to the very first RZR 800. By today's standards, it wasn't very powerful, didn't have great suspension, and was in reality tiny in overall size. But when it was released, the industry hadn't seen anything like it. It really was the first of its kind. A side-by-side that focused almost entirely on fun versus work or utility. Consumers had been begging for it, and Polaris didn't disappoint. With an 800cc parallel even-firing twin, four-wheel independent double A-arm suspension, bucket seats, and a roll cage, this was the coolest thing any of us had ever seen. And it took off like a wildfire. Everyone wanted one and sales were huge, but it didn't take long for consumers to ask the age-old question, what's next? And it didn't take long for Polaris to answer that question in the form of the RZR S. Basically the same platform as the RZR, just 10 inches wider with a bit more travel. Its 60-inch stance made it drastically more stable at higher speeds, and the longer travel meant you could hit bigger jumps and attack rough terrain way harder. The RZR S was, again, a huge success, but again, the question was quickly asked, what now? The next RZR I want to talk about is actually one of the most important, because it pushed the boundaries of what a sport side-by-side could be into a whole different realm. The 2011 RZR XP 900 was the first sport side-by-side in the industry to come equipped with a 3-link trailing arm rear suspension, the same style of rear suspension found on full-size trophy trucks and buggies. The difference in big bump capabilities was dramatic, and it proved the point that if you wanted to build the ultimate pure sport side-by-side, this was the suspension design you were gonna have to use. From that point, Polaris was on a mission. It seemed like every year we were being introduced to a new Polaris model, sometimes with a new, more powerful motor, other times a completely new chassis. The XP1000, XP1000 Turbo, Velocity, and Pro XP all followed and were all offered in both 2 and 4-seat configurations. Horsepower was pushed past 180 ponies, travel numbers hit 20 and even 24 inches. By the time the Pro XP was released, sport side-by-sides had become every bit as technologically advanced as any other high-performance off-road vehicle, and, to be honest, every bit as capable as well. At this point in side-by-side history, there were a few traits that all sport side-by-sides shared. First, all sport side-by-sides were 72 inches max, and most of them were under that. And second, all sport side-by-sides were powered by either twin or triple cylinder engines that were under 1000 cc's. All of this brings us to today. Once again, Polaris has turned the industry on its nose with the release of the Turbo R and Pro R RZR models. Each of them push past the boundaries of what a sport side-by-side has been until now. The big story is of course the Pro R, but before I get to that, I want to quickly look at the Turbo R model. So what is a Turbo R? Of these two new models, it is the one that's the most familiar and shares the most common parts with a Pro XP. The overall chassis dimensions are the same, as is the wheelbase. However, the suspension system is completely different and ultra impressive. Incredibly strong boxed steel A-arms and tubular trailing arms with boxed gusseting push the overall width to 74 inches and actual wheel travel to 22.5 inches front and rear. Unitized front hubs and bearings are stronger than the ones found on the Pro XP and have 5 lugs instead of 4. Aluminum top hat disc brake rotors are stronger and dissipate heat better, and the all-new Dynamics DV system is found on the Ultimate model. Under the hood, you'll find the same 181 horsepower turbocharged twin that powers the Pro XP, and the interior is the same as well. Pretty much all the accessories that fit the Pro XP will directly fit the Turbo R. In a nutshell, the Turbo R is the even more serious version of the Pro XP, and when it comes to commonalities, the base platforms are very similar. The Pro R, on the other hand, is a whole new beast from the ground up. Let's start with the solid box chassis and one-piece welded roll cage. In terms of strength, those are significant upgrades over the Pro XP. Not just stronger, but more rigid as well, and the roll cage is tougher and therefore safer. Mated to this new chassis is the same boxed steel double A-arm front suspension setup as found on the Turbo R. The front shocks are mounted to the lower A-arms, and the lower shock mount is actually split and goes around the drive shaft. The same unitized hubs with 5 lugs as the Turbo R are also present here, and actual wheel travel is the same 22.5 inches. Out back is where things really get interesting though. The Pro R features fully boxed steel trailing arms with integrated toe links. These arms are longer and increase the wheelbase over the Turbo R by a full 8 inches. Actual rear wheel travel is an unreal 24.5 inches. That's over 2 feet. Like the Turbo R, the Pro R's stance is an industry-leading 74 inches wide. All of this travel is damped by a full set of Fox 3.0 live valve X2 internal bypass electronically controlled shocks. Saying that this is the most advanced suspension system ever offered on a stock side-by-side doesn't quite do it justice. The system itself is called Dynamics DV, and now I'm going to make an assumption that DV stands for dual valve. If it doesn't, I think it should. This is because Dynamics DV not only adjusts compression, but also rebound damping, and both circuits are 100% independent of each other. This system not only controls how the suspension responds to chassis inputs and how it handles bumps, but it has the ability to adjust chassis attitude, whether climbing, descending, or traversing off-camber lines. Dynamics DV is impressive, there's no question, but I think the one aspect of the Pro R that people are dying to know about most is the engine. The RZR Pro R's power plant is the industry's first 4-cylinder unit and displaces 1997 cc's. It generates a whopping 225 horsepower and over 150 foot-pounds of torque. Now there will inevitably be some that suggest this isn't very impressive when the Maverick's 3-cylinder engine produces 200 horsepower from only 900 cc's. However, the Pro R's engine is naturally aspirated, and the importance of that fact can't be understated. The horsepower this engine produces is nothing short of incredible. Utilizing an engine of this size brings a few other benefits along with it. Most notably is a 1700 watt charging system that is more than capable of handling as many light bars as you can afford. The other interesting and much appreciated feature is multiple drive modes, something I feel Polaris needs to include on all their side-by-side models. The modes are Sport, Rock, and Race. Selecting these modes doesn't just alter the throttle profile, but also adjusts the power steering output as well. To handle this much power, Polaris had to develop a new CV transmission. This one is dimensionally larger, has a larger belt, and dual cooling ducts. Likewise, a new drivetrain was developed that is again significantly stronger from front to back and includes a new front differential. This differential does away with Polaris's on-demand auto-locking 4x4 system and instead uses a manual rocker switch to move between 2x4, 4x4 open diff, and 4x4 fully locked. The interior of the Pro R is identical to that of the Turbo R and ultimately the Pro XP. Front-end bodywork is also the same, with only some minor changes to the rear-end bodywork to accommodate the larger engine underneath the cargo tray. The truth is, I could dedicate an entire episode of Dirt Tracks just to talking about Polaris's new Turbo R and Pro R RZR models. The list of little upgrades and new features is a mile long. Today I wanted to give you a higher level overview of the most notable and impressive new specs. We'll bring you a full and more in-depth ride review when we finally get our hands on one of these units. Polaris started the sport side-by-side category almost 14 years ago with the original RZR 800, and it's funny to look back on that vehicle and think about just how awesome we thought it actually was. Of course, the biggest question has always been, and will always be, what could possibly be next? For 2022, Polaris has shown us that there really aren't any limits to just how far they can go with the RZR.